It's about 10 minutes of David Bennett, I want to say. Is that his name? Not even close.
Backhouse?
Stephen Backhouse, David Bennett. It's like a normal person name, though. You know what I mean? It's just like a kind of,
normal
man dude name. Welcome to Beer Christianity. My name is Jonty.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Malky.
And this week we're going to be talking about two specific things. We're going to be talking about the the Expansion Rebellion. The Extinction Rebellion. The Extinction Rebellion. I want to say October Rebellion, September Rebellion, August. September.
Have we had October yet?
Time is a human construct. Anyway, welcome to Beer Christianity. We are going to be talking about the September Rebellion. There's another word. It's the September uprising.
That's the one.
That Laura was at, and we've got a little bit of a clip that we're going to play you from that because she has been our roving reporter, and it sounds awesome. And we're also going to be talking about a man who I keep on calling David Bennett because that is just a man's name, and that is not his name. His name is Peter Stackhouse. No?
Oh, wow. Stephen Backhouse is like a proper guy. He's a proper quasi-famous doctor man.
Okay, Stephen Backhouse, who is famous. I was not making a joke. I thought I had got it that time. I am so sorry for getting the name wrong again. I am not good at this. Anyway.
Should be on the radio.
I know, right? We are going to be playing a really amazing clip from him that is very, I'm going to say it's challenging. I'm going to say it's controversial. I'm going to say it's really interesting, and you'll probably have a reaction to it, which is what we want, because we want you to send questions in for him so that when we interview him, we are answering the things that you want to hear answered. So do send us your thoughts on that and whatever else you want on the podcast. It is beerchristianity@yahoo.com. That's our email address. You can also get hold of us on Twitter. We are beerxianity. That is an X instead of Christ. Again, an odd choice to do for an audio format podcast. And you can find all of our episodes and stuff on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and at beerchristianity.libsyn.com. But basically just Google Beer Christianity Podcast and you will find us. So that's all coming up. But first, I mean, Laura, what did you think of, what was maybe the best video you've seen in the last week?
Oh, I've seen so many, but I think top of my list would be the fabulous new promotion video created by our good friend Malky, friend of the podcast.
I love how you got weird about that. We're just good friends. Malky, our boyfriend. Malky.
Our boyfriend, my partner, Malky Curry.
On behalf of
dearly beloved, we are gathered here
to share with you the Beer Christianity promo video.
The Beer Christianity promo video, which you can find on our Facebook page as well as on Instagram, and I think probably on Twitter. I think I shared it there as well. It's a lovely video that Malky has made, and it's a great way to promote us. And if you like the podcast, I would love it if you could maybe share it with your friends on your social and say, hey, you should listen to this podcast, because we would love for more people to know about the podcast and listen to us and, all of those validation needing things. So, Malky, tell us how you made the video and what it was like. And
computers, mate. Just used computers for it.
Jolly good. Right. That's great. That's a beautiful insight into your process. Thank you so much. So do take a look at that, because it's actually a very cool video, and it would be great if you could share it if you are one of our listeners, and just generally, help us promote ourselves. I don't know. This feels very needy, so I'm going to stop doing it.
Love us.
And say, here is our roving reporter, Laura, heading out onto the streets of London to join the Extinction Rebellion folks. When was this? Was it sometime in early September, late September?
The 1st of September.
The 1st of September, so quite early in September.
Yes. Perhaps
and
known as the earliest in
maybe
September.
earlier than most other days in September. And this is what it sounded like.
Hello, I'm here at the September Rebellion, and you can probably hear it in the background because I'm walking towards Parliament Square. I'm having a wonderful time here. I just chatted to Holly Anna Peterson from Christian Climate Action and seen them doing a service, and it's just really wonderful.
My name is Holly Anna Peterson, and I'm here to take part in the Extinction Rebellion, September Rebellion, September uprising. And I guess I'm primarily here as a Christian.
My name is Melanie Nazareth. I'm part of Christian Climate Action, which is the Christians of Extinction Rebellion.
So my name's Kate Tingle. I'm an ordinand at the Queen's Foundation, so I'm training to be a priest in the Church of England.
Yes, my name's Jeremy Williams. Well, I'm down here with Exile Luton. I'm also with Christian Climate Action.
And we're here because we think that this is the existential issue of that faces humanity and the rest of the planet. And it's God's creation. It's beloved of God. What we're doing to it is just heartbreaking.
I think as a Christian, I don't know how I could possibly square following a God of justice and following Jesus, who is on the side of the poor, and not stand for the poor when I have a chance. I don't know how I would be able to do that, to be honest.
The reason I think that people of faith should be involved in climate action, in climate kind of fighting for climate justice, is because I think justice should be the foundation for so much of our faith, and that justice should be founded on love. And I think it's got to a point where we can only express that justice, that heart for justice and heart for love through being on the streets, because we're just not seeing that action shown in policy, in the general humanity of our leaders. So I think that's why it's very important for us to be out on the streets right now.
Being involved in justice is how I learn to be a better neighbour to those in my community, those in the wider world who I may never meet, and to creation itself.
And I think our faith calls us to this action. It calls us to follow the example of Jesus, who was radical. And that's why we're here. Although I'm running a prayer vigil, so everything we do is grounded by prayer. So we're praying. We've been on the ground since 7 o'clock last night. We were praying outside Downing Street all night last night. Then we came in here, and now we're still going. And we'll do this for 24 hours a day for 7 days. Sorry, it's lack of sleep.
I don't necessarily want to be critical, but I find it week in, week out in church a bit of a struggle when I know what's happening through climate change and the way that our consumer economy is damaging the planet and damaging people in other parts of the world, and it gets mentioned so rarely.
Yeah.
And I kind of sit there going, can we please remember who it is that we worship?
Absolutely.
And turn away from ourselves and our own personal salvation and remember what it is that God calls us to.
When we allow ourselves to be moved by the Holy Spirit and, kind of feel that love which casts out fear, and how much kind of our God's heart breaks for those who are suffering around the world, it is almost impossible not to get on the streets and protest.
And we're done. Hey, Laura! Laura, what was it like out there? What was the vibe?
I mean, it was definitely weird being in London because of all the coronavirus shenanigans. So it was definitely quite weird in that regard. But honestly, like, the whole day felt like a festival. Like, you heard the drumming, and I think in one of the background of one of the clips you could hear a very funky bass guitar. And it was
cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. And
when we were listening to that, we were all rocking out and dancing.
Around.
It's a sad thing it's not a video podcast.
I know, as we've said many times. But yeah, no, and like, I think my very much my impression of it was during that day. It was kind of like, that was like the fun day. That was the day that you kind of go and you march, and like people, I mean, I think people were bringing their kids the whole time, but there were families there, and we had speakers. Caroline Lucas was speaking, which she was great. But then I left quite early, but my impression was kind of from then on, that's when kind of the urgency kind of sets in, and like, the police were there, the police were arresting people when I was there. I personally didn't feel like I was at risk of getting arrested. I didn't get arrested. I didn't intend to get arrested. And I felt very safe. I didn't really sit in the road, but I felt like if I had sat in the road and then moved, I would have been fine with the police. They seemed very calm. But after that day, there was a group of protesters kettled on Lambeth Bridge, and there was about 200 people who were arrested. And there was a couple of, I think, like kind of reports of just kind of aggressive or racist acts by the police. It's weird having been there and experienced that kind of side of it, but then also knowing like this is, like, there's a lot of other stuff that does happen there that I haven't experienced. So.
And would you recommend to other Christians who have never been on a demonstration, would you recommend going?
I would, definitely. I think it was good. It was interesting. There was a lot of good people there. And I think especially as a Christian, it was great to be there and kind of mix with other people of other faiths, of no faiths, and kind of all kind of be together and have that respect for your beliefs, but also kind of know that you're there for the same cause. I think that's really nice. I think like people are genuinely very like good to each other. You know, we had Hare Krishnas who had been who were cooking the food and like handing out hot food and stuff like that. And so yeah, like I would definitely recommend going.
Oh, that's really cool. And now, I mean, for people who are a little bit nervous, I mean, is this something you do a lot? Are you just a fearless individual with no anxiety who can just go into like some quite odd situations really easily? Like that's a big no from Laura.
No, I was definitely, I think. So I did go up on my own. I kind of managed to kind of befriend some other Oxford rebels on the way up, which was really handy and like quite nice. And like I think it hadn't really hit me about how I was nervous about. I hadn't really thought about being arrested, and because as I said, I don't intend on being arrested. That's just, I'm not like saying that you shouldn't be arrested, but that's just me. And then you get there and then you do meet the people who are handing out like the arrestee cards. So it's like the people who are like, make sure everyone has an arrestee card, and you know, so you know who to call if you get arrested. And I was like, oh no, maybe what if I do get arrested? And that was a bit like nervy. But then I think I met somebody in the crowd and she was sort of like, it was her kind of second or third, I think, and she hadn't been arrested, and she kind of was saying it is generally quite okay, like a lot of the time it is quite unlikely. That isn't the case the whole time, and Extinction Rebellion very much are open about the fact that no event is 100% risk-free in that regard. Like as I said, there was 200 people kettled on Lambeth Bridge, and I think most of them got arrested. So yeah, I was like nervous, but I think the more you go there and like the people are so friendly, and you can quite easily kind of make friends with people in the crowd, and like people will stop for photos and you can just kind of sing along and cheer and stuff like that, which was great. It was really great.
Such a vibe, man. I love demos. Malky, your experience of it. You've been in a demo where you've been kettled, because I was kettled with you, man.
Was that the cuts?
That was the anti-cuts one, anti-austerity one. Back in, I want to say 12, 13, 9. Yeah, around there.
Something like that. And then that's what led to, that was the occupation of St. Paul's. Yeah. But it was like very publicised, and the police were like, okay, we can read Facebook also. We blocked off those streets. And then, there was a meandering around until they kind of settled. Let's sit outside a church.
What was it like being kettled? Because that doesn't sound like a fun experience.
I found it super stressful, I'm not going to lie, because I hate that sense of being trapped. And I really did want to get out. And we were like, hey, man, we've just come from that coffee shop. And the cop looked at my T-shirt, which was some kind of war on want, like no blood for oil type thing. And he was like, no, mate. It was like poverty is political. And he was like, you're staying right here. So we were stuck there for a while. And we were looking at the kind of, the Occupy guys sitting on the steps holding some kind of, non-violent communication forum where they were clicking because clapping is too, violent a form of, you lose me at that sort of stuff. But like apart from the clicking, it was a good day.
Yeah, it was good. I think that with regard to the kettling, it's pretty effective, like for your moderates like myself. Because it's just like, this is annoying, and now I want to go home. Yeah. It has that effect of like, nope, you're staying and you can't go. All the exits are blocked off. and we're not giving you any information.
And we're just not going to let you go. And I think it is an actual tactic of intimidation. It's actively to discourage people from demonstrating, which
100%.
you don't have to be a fascist state in order to do that. And I'm not suggesting that that's what that is, but it is a form of control and a form of discouraging of any kind of dissent, which I find troubling in a democracy. And the fact that people seem fine with it bothers me. It's like, as long as the police aren't cracking heads, that's okay. And I think, well, no, not really. I get keeping order is their job, I guess, but yeah.
And having read stories, I think I read a Twitter thread or something of somebody who got kettled a few months back in a Black Lives Matter protest, and it sounds like actually quite dehumanizing in terms of I think there were people who were kept there for 5 or 6 hours. So there's people who haven't eaten, who need to go to the loo and stuff like that, and they're just not they just have to find somewhere to do that. And that side of it sounds not great.
Yeah, it's really not great.
So Laura, was this before the direct action on the old printing presses that shut down?
Yes, this was before. So that I found actually really interesting, because Extinction Rebellion are quite good at not publicising events beforehand. So I had no idea that they were going to do this. But yeah, they held a they didn't even say that they were going to do it until pretty much the time that they did it. But there's a street in London where apparently there's a load of right-wing think tanks, and they kind of it was Extinction Rebellion Writers Rebel who held afternoon, evening long kind of demonstration there, where they got Zadie Smith was there, and I think they had a recording from Margaret Atwood as well, kind of doing stuff around that. And then they blocked they went and blocked printing presses with, I think they had massive bamboo structures, as you see them, with people climbed on top of and attached to, and they stopped a load of newspapers going out, which got a lot of people quite cross.
And so it was the Murdoch press, right? So the Sun, the Times.
I was fully I thought it was a genius idea, because actually they did kind of raise the point to a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily have thought that way, in terms of actually we're talking all about the free press. It's a handful of people who own, handful of very, very rich people who own all of the print media that you're seeing. There is going to be some bias there.
Well, let's start with that. I mean, Malky, what do you think of shutting down the free press, as it was put by some liberals online? You see, they hate any kind of criticism or whatever. I mean, what do you think about that kind of action?
Well, in the words of the actual government, it was only breaking the law in a specific and targeted way. Am I right?
Yeah.
But I think it was one day, one run of press, and a targeted, we're going for these papers. We're not running them into the ground. We're not making them go bust. We're not actually doing anything violent. We're sending a message and we're demonstrating. So I think it's well thought out. It's well planned. I think less controversial than some of the other actions. And specifically because of their lack of climate change coverage. And presumably because a lot of them are mixed up in oil money. One
would imagine, yeah. And I think, Rupert Murdoch's kind of incredibly negative effect on the world, beyond climate change, is probably not hard to find out. If you wanted to Google that, Google "why is Rupert Murdoch a dick?" and you'll probably see a fair amount of that, because his papers tend to lean right and to undermine any kind of public belief in kind of left-wing solutions, or solutions that might be for the common good. For people out there, and a lot of Christians are like this, they're very, very antsy about disrupting traffic, public disorder, doing anything illegal, definitely, but just demonstrations generally. And we see this in the States, we see this here, we see it back in South Africa, where I'm from. Middle-class Christians being particularly not okay with demonstrations and protests, particularly if somebody breaks a window. But even without that, what are your thoughts on that, guys?
I mean, I think I kind of said it in I don't know if it's me who said it or what, somebody else. I'm stealing their words, but in the clip we played. But my stance is very much that at this point, there's not much more we can do in terms of like, if you're passionate about an issue, there are some issues that I am passionate about that I don't think are getting the attention that they deserve by the government, by policymakers in any way. And that's why I demonstrate. That's why I do that. And I think that goes for any opinion. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but, you know, there are people who picket abortion clinics every day, and that they believe that the issue that they're passionate about is not being heard and not being seen about, and they're passionate about that to the point where they will go and picket that. And I think if you're saying that that is okay and demonstrating for climate change or Black Lives Matter is not okay, I think, or, you know, the people who are protesting not wearing masks in the UK and in America, I think if you're thinking that's okay, but fighting for anti-racism, fighting for climate justice is not, I think you really need to think about why, because that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, sort your life out.
Yeah, I think there's two issues. First of all, is the issue real and big enough and important enough? So that would be an argument, like, is climate change real? Is it really a catastrophe? You know, is police brutality and racism real? Although it feels ridiculous even asking that question. But if something is so important and it's not changing through traditional means, voting once every 4 years, then what other options do we have? And I think there's lots of people much better read than me, but if you think about any major societal change, they came around through some ugly means, like women's suffrage, I guess workers' rights, trade union movements. Like, it's not all clean and we do one peaceful protest on a Saturday and then that's when the change happens. That's not how you speak truth to power. The point is, it's difficult and needs to be disruptive, needs to cause people to change and be annoyed and make people feel uncomfortable. You know, you see that in the various demonstrations of Black Lives Matter. Like, they can't just take a knee during a national anthem at an American football match because that's offensive. Like, there are no options if you fundamentally disagree with what they believe in.
And I think it's also important to remember that criticising your government is okay and is legal. It should be legal. It is generally legal in most. I'm sure there are places where it is not legal, but like in America and in the UK, I think in America I may be wrong, but I think you do have a constitutional right to complain about your government, and
they have a constitutional right to take up arms against their government.
Yeah.
I find, you know, when people are like, you shouldn't protest and break windows, I'm like, your constitution that you venerate like the Bible says that you can literally shoot your government if they are bad. Like,
don't get angry at people just because they're questioning the way things are, and think about why they're doing that, and why they're doing that during a pandemic. Like, it is dangerous. Like, I put myself at risk by going to a demonstration. I understand that and I respect that, but I still did that because I thought it was important and I think it was necessary.
Yeah, because ultimately there is risk in there. But if we do nothing, if we say nothing, and if we allow our government to take us down the course that they currently are of not taking climate change seriously, the danger is much, much worse. You just need to look at the states and the color of the sky over Oregon. The amount that people have lost through forest fires. This stuff gets worse and worse as extreme weather increases, as climate change gets worse. So yeah, there is that thing that, as Malky also said, about proportionality and are you right? Is this important? What about the Christians who say, yeah, but we have been commanded in Scripture to submit to authorities? Malky?
Well, that's one for Stephen Backhouse coming up.
David Peterson.
Yeah, John McPherson.
Elliot Smith.
Because I think a lot of examples of something like abortion, which is often something on the right, then that brings it into sharp focus of course Christians are okay opposing authorities. And you know, that doesn't hold much water. There's got to be a reasonable amount of context. It's the bit in Romans 13, isn't it? What's the verse that you're referring to, Jonty? Come on, quote it for me.
It's be a good boy and you will get your treats. I think that's the message. Obviously, that's what the message is. The Message bootlicking translation is it's not an insult to the Message translation, everybody. Although it's not a translation, is it? It's not a freaking translation. Anyway, I'm sorry, Malky. Yeah, that one.
Taking a turn.
Screw you, Eugene.
That's our regularly scheduled programming.
No, but yeah, it is that submit to the authorities because they've been put there by God, which is cool if you don't believe in democracy, because every 4 years or 5 years, depending on your system, you remove the rulers. And surely if God put them there, then you shouldn't vote against them. You should always vote with the incumbent. If your logic is God has put them there so you cannot oppose them by demonstrating, then you cannot oppose them by voting, I would have thought, which just kind of excludes all Christians from democracy, which seems a strange decision to make. I mean, not, I guess, illegitimate, but strange. I don't know. Your thoughts?
I remember, this is funny, I'm getting a recall from a John Piper sermon, because he spoke on this, and he was saying that, because equally, as I say, from the right, from the conservative right, then you're not going to just allow any government to do what they want and think that's somehow blessed by God. And he says that's a kind of that's a call to those in authority, saying you've been placed there by God, you have a responsibility to be a steward of God, I guess.
Nice.
But yeah, in the context of like all the anti-establishment stuff that Jesus says, and the importance of the commands of God versus man, then I think when there's clear commands of God, then that's what we need to follow.
I think I've been kind of having listened to some of the Stephen Backhouse stuff coming soon on Bare Christianity. Peter Bennett.
Jason Dinklage.
I've kind of been challenged, I think, a little bit by this, because I very much what his, as we will hear, very much kind of nationalism is anti-Christian. We shouldn't, I guess our first priority should be kind of following the laws of Jesus. And my kind of thought is like, okay, well, if that is my first priority, then is it then okay for me to get arrested? And is it bad that I choose not to? Because if I really do care about this, why am I not allowing myself to be arrested? And that's something that I've genuinely been considering and thinking about. And I don't know whether whether I will be getting arrested. I don't know, and I deeply apologize to my parents who I know will be listening to this and be very terrified. It'll be okay. I'm okay. I don't know. I can't say that I'm not going to. I don't plan to at this point, but maybe I'll change my mind. I don't know.
That's a really interesting call.
That piece of audio was the last we heard of her.
That's right. An
She was never
unmarked
seen
car
again.
showed up at her house. But that's an interesting thought, that as a Christian, do you have a duty to get involved in protest to the level where you are genuinely opposing government, where they cannot actually tolerate you on issues that are important to God, and kind of almost in a proportionate way? Is that a question? I feel like that's a more helpful question to ask than, well, I don't know if Christians should be blocking traffic. It just seems.
And I don't know whether this is an answer to that question at all, but one of the women who you had heard in the clip, her name was Melanie Nazareth, and I chatted to her a little bit after I recorded her, and she said some great stuff, which I'm very sad that I didn't actually catch on record, but she said something where she was like, the people who I see here are the real Christians. And she said, I think God knocked on the door of Christianity and Christianity did not answer, so God knocked on the door of Extinction Rebellion. And that, I was like, damn, like, fair. Yeah. So
similar to something I heard a theologian called Parush Parashev, who used to teach at the International Baptist Theological Seminary in Prague. And I think he said something along the lines of, there would be no need for communism if the church had been doing its job. Similar kind of thing of like, God calls us to do these things when we are derelict in our duty, then he must work through the world. Maybe that's our privileged position, is God places prophets in our midst to tell us these are the things we should be caring about. He gives us the Bible with its principles of caring for the least of these and speaking truth to power. He gives us the Holy Spirit and prophets. And if we ignore them, then he goes, well, okay, I gave you a shot, but now we will work the rest of the world. I realize non-Christians might find that heinously arrogant, but I don't know. I'm prepared to believe it. Malky?
Well, I think it kind of drives back at that fundamental question of like, should Christians get involved in politics? Like, basically, is your version of Christianity just about a private set of beliefs about getting into heaven, or is it embodying the Spirit of God who cares about stuff, who cares about people, human beings, and creation, and that we're to do good in the world and help those who are suffering and bring good news to the poor? That's not just, this is the little short story of, Jesus forgiving your sins and getting into heaven.
Yeah, because I mean, what does the body of Christ mean to you if we're not meant to do something here? What is embodying Christ? What is being his body on earth? Like, what could that possibly mean if you're not meant to be doing the things that he did? Which wasn't only preaching, which was challenging and modeling different ways of doing things. I also think it's quite interesting when people have, when Christians have a bit of a hard-on for authority, because I'm like, but these are the guys who literally crucified Jesus and tortured him to death. And I understand that Jesus dying for us was a good thing, but do you think those are the good guys? I don't know how you're reading that story. Like, why would you, oh, well, if he, and again, you come back to the Black Lives Matter stuff where you're hearing all of these right-wingers and even some liberals who just, that's more angering from them, saying, well, if you just do what they tell you, then you won't get shot, as if it's okay to get shot for disobeying a command from a cop. And the idea that, well, if Jesus just did what he told, then he wouldn't have got crucified. Like, do they have sympathy for that? What goes through your head when you think these things? Malky, what goes through your head when you think
I just feel that's very, like, I need to be careful when I say this because, the old plank in your eye thing. But that just feels like that's not Christianity. That's your culture talking. That's your whatever, your tribe's values speaking. It's not come from reading what Jesus taught when he walked on the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that bringing us to the place of worshipping the nuclear family, worshipping temporal authority and religious institutions, when Jesus did, basically the opposite, brings us quite nicely to a clip by Jennifer Aniston, which is man, I hope he doesn't listen to this because I don't mean this disrespectfully at all. I just am not very good at names today. Yeah, we got a clip. We're going to play it for you. But before we get there, we haven't done the important thing of discussing what we've been drinking. Laura, what you been drinking?
I am once again drinking from a glass of white wine. Why I phrased it like that? No, I rebought the £7 bottle of wine that I bought a few weeks ago because it was really good wine and I liked the bottle and it was still an Aldi. So
nice. Do you yet know what it's called?
No.
It's just like if you want to drink. If you want to drink what Laura is drinking, get
yourself to Aldi. Find a bottle of white wine that costs $6.99, and it's quite likely the wine that I'm drinking right now.
Excellent. Malky, what are you drinking?
I am drinking Budweiser Zero. Back in the old alcohol-free beer. It's all right.
Is it all right? Have you had Heineken Zero, which is what I've been drinking, along with a non-alcoholic one called Innocent Gun Tropic Like It's Hop, which I think is a quite nice.
Wow.
That is good. Like that.
The name.
That's a solid one.
Hello? Did you describe that as a non-alcoholic beer?
It's a non-alcoholic beer, yeah. It's a passion fruit pale ale.
No non-alcohol.
It has 0% non-alcohol. Actually, that's not true. It must have 96% alcohol. But the Heineken Zero, I really like, actually, as far as the non-alcoholic beers go. What are you saying, Laura?
I was just going to say that non-alcoholic beer just baffles me because, like, to me, I just don't like beer. So, like, the only reason I would drink beer would be to get drunk. I'm like, why are you drinking?
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Hi, Graham.
Anyway, I think that is a good roundup of what we've been drinking. You're listening to Beer Christianity. You can find us on all the podcast places and at beerchristianity.libsyn.com. Please get in touch with us. Please say hi. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think we should be talking about, what you'd like to hear about. And now we're going to play you a clip by a guy.
His name is Stephen Backhouse. Stephen Backhouse, spelled with a PH.
What? Backhouse?
Oh, it's bad because I have actually been listening to his podcast.
I got it. Stephen Backhouse of Tent Theology, which is an amazing podcast that you should listen to.
Have you been infected by the idolatry of nationalism? A handy checklist for people who say that Jesus is their Lord. As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you think patriotism is a virtue? Do you think the nation is like a family? Do you think the nation is like a neighborhood? Do you think the nation is like a person? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, does your national story tell you something true about where you came from? Does your national story tell you something true about who you are? Does your national story tell you something true about your destiny? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you worship in a church that has a national flag in it? Do you know people who worship in churches that have a national flag in it? Do you venerate veterans? Do you agree countries are sovereign? Is your flag sacred? Is your constitution a sacred document? Have you made an oath to your country? Should new immigrants be required to swear allegiance to their countries? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, is your national story true? Can any national story be true? Do you accept that private morality is different from public responsibility? Do you think being a Christian makes you a better citizen? Do you think loving your nation is another way to love your neighbor? Do you think that people with public responsibility are exempted from the Sermon on the Mount because you cannot run a country that way? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do your politicians regularly invoke God in their speeches? Do your politicians ever quote Bible verses? Do your politicians ever quote Bible verses and replace the name of Jesus with the name of your country's flag? Do you or any of your friends and family think that this is fine? Do your politicians ever quote Bible verses and replace the name of Jesus with the name of your country? Do you or any of your friends and family think this is fine? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you like it when politicians quote the Bible or talk about God in their speeches? Do you have friends and family who like it when politicians quote the Bible or talk about God in their speeches? Do your national songs mention God? Does your money mention God? Do the official legal and court documents of the land mention God? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you think your country used to be a Christian nation? Do you think you currently live in a Christian nation? Do you think your country may one day, once again, be a Christian nation? Do you think soldiers who died in battle paid the ultimate sacrifice? Do you think war is necessary to bring peace? Do you think that it is a reasonable use of violence to kill the enemies of your country? Do you have a monument to fallen soldiers in your town? Does that monument have a cross on it? Does that monument have a Bible verse? Is that verse, "Greater love has no man than this, that he lays down his life for his friends"? Do you think more about the people that died for your country than you do about the people that killed for your country? Does it make you feel uncomfortable to focus on people killing for you rather than dying for you? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you agree that it is right and good for countries to reserve their resources for their own citizens? Do you think asylum seekers are illegal? Do you think being illegal is the same as being bad? Do you think being bad is punishable by torture and death? Do you think it is wrong to provide a cup of cold water to an illegal immigrant? Do you think it is right to separate children from their parents if the parents are illegal immigrants? Do you think it is right to defend your country's borders using lethal violence if necessary? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, have you ever participated in a debate where both sides claim to be the patriotic ones? Is being labelled unpatriotic a problem for you? Do you support the troops? Do you celebrate Memorial Day? Do you know what Remembrance Sunday is? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, does your country have a flag? Does that flag represent a country that has genocide, rape, pillage, slavery, aggressive land annexation, economic extortion, broken treaties, falsified information, and pious religious rhetoric in its history? Does that flag represent a country that claims it once was, is now, or will be once again a Christian nation? Do you think your nation has been chosen by God? Do you think nations have a special role to play? Are national characteristics unique? Do you think that nations can relate to other nations like individual persons relate to other persons? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you believe in progress? Do you think that there is a right side to history? Do you think you are on it? Is nation the next logical step in this sequence? Individual, family, neighborhood. Is your country bigger than your church? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you think there is such a thing as a just war? Do you think love of country is equivalent to love of neighbor? Do you think making disciples of all nations means running the nation? Do you think disciples of all nations will be allegiant to those nations? Is the nation state a form of political organization ordained by God for the right running of the world? Will nations preserve their uniqueness, power, and purpose in the life of the new age? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you believe when Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar," he was being patriotic? Do you believe when Paul said, "Submit to the ruling authorities," he was being patriotic? Does patriotism bring peace? Is patriotism a uniting force? Does patriotism provide purpose? Does seeing your flag flutter in the breeze stir you with pride? As someone who says Jesus is Lord, do you think the nation is a natural and inevitable feature of creation? Do you think the story of Jesus clearing the temple is about religion mixing with business? Do you think that the story about paying coins to Caesar is about taxes? Do you think the parable of the Good Samaritan is about being kind to poor people? Do you think the cross was punishment for bad theology? Score 1 point for every yes. If you have scored 1 point or more, We are sorry to tell you that your imagination has been colonized by the idolatry of nationalism. You believe some combination of the following: that theological words once reserved for the divine now apply to the machineries of state, that the nation is sacred and deserves worship, that nations are created in the image of God, and that the progress of history and the development of nations is the culmination of the divine purpose of creation. You think that countries that did not exist when the New Testament was written have a higher claim on you than the life, words, and example of Jesus Christ. You do not really believe that Jesus is the Word of God, that Jesus speaks with the voice of God, or that his way is relevant to you or the people around you. Unlike the earliest followers of Jesus, who knew it was a vice, you think that patriotism is a virtue, that being a good citizen is more important than being a follower of the way, and that making your country great again is an aim, if not the aim, of the disciple. You believe your nation gives your identity its ultimate purpose and meaning. It is your nation in which you live and move and have your being. You think that your country is a powerful force in the universe that demands and requires human sacrifice, either yours, your children's, or your enemies. You believe not only that the life and words of the Lord Jesus can be ignored, but that they should be if following his way would undermine your prior commitment to patriotism. If you would like to talk to someone about your symptoms, seek out a doctor of theology, or listen to Tent Theology, the podcast for the renewing of the social and political imagination for followers of the way of Jesus. Thank you for taking our test. Here's to your good health.
Well, I mean, I first want to say, fuck you, man. That's not what I believe.
Yeah, man.
I mean, I want to first say that the smarmy assumptions about what I believe based on the fact that my country has a flag and that some of my friends or family believe things aside, I think there's a lot of very good stuff in there. I think that to a large extent, a lot of people have been infected by patriotism as an idolatry that we put above God. I think some nations have it stronger kind of rammed down people's throat than others. But I think some of the stuff in there is just a bit like, really? This is a thing that means that you've been essentially indoctrinated into a heresy. I was thinking, do we think that private morality is different from public responsibility? In as much as I think that the government has no real right to be in the bedroom of people and, their sex lives are probably private, then, yeah, I think there is a private-public, divide. Do I mind that politicians quote Bible verses? Well, not if they're saying that we should take care of the least of these, and it's the latter half of Matthew 25. I'm actually kind of cool with that if they're trying to use the Bible to make sure that nations don't kill people for crossing their borders or have asylum seekers tortured. And I don't know, what do you guys got there? What are your thoughts? We're going to ask, by the way, if you're listening to this and you found that interesting or stimulating or angering, we want to hear your thoughts, we want to hear your comments, and we want to hear your questions. Write to beachristianity@yahoo.com. Tweet at us, send us private messages on Facebook, whatever you want to do. Get in touch.
I think something that I was really struck with when listening to it is that, it's very easy, I think, for us living in the UK, or if you're living in America, very easy for us to say, historically, we shouldn't take as much pride in our country as we do. I mean, fucking Americans' allegiance to the flag, if you haven't already heard it, saying allegiance to your flag in school is fucked up and weird, and don't do that. It's weird. But I struggle with the idea of saying to, for example, a Native American or somebody whose country was colonized by quite likely England or America or Holland or wherever, or France, saying, no, you shouldn't have an appreciation for your nation. I find that quite difficult to, and I guess this is less nation, more culture. But I would
substitute that for Palestine. Tell Palestinians, oh, you shouldn't care about Palestine. And I have some problems with that because it is slightly nationalistic, but you can kind of see the usefulness of it, I would have thought.
Yeah, so
At least if it's secondary to God. I think that's the thing, is like, it cannot be your number one priority. I would say it shouldn't be anywhere near your top priority myself. But, oh, sorry, Laura.
No, I was going to say, when like, I think it's a lot of the thing of like, Manifest Destiny in America, a lot of that is in the name of Christianity. And I think for then to turn around to nations and say, no, like, you have to like forgo your nation and only look to God. I think that's a whole other theological story. But I don't know. I find that difficult.
Yeah, I'm caught between, on one hand, like, I'm prepared to fully sign up to borders or just, bits of red pen on a map. Like, it's all totally arbitrary. You're just a human being that happens to be born in a certain place in a certain time. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean you're inherently anything, good or badder. Especially when you look at extreme ideas of, American exceptionalism or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Just seem mad. But on the other hand, like, as a Scotchman, I don't know, where do you draw the line? As you say, like, in terms of priorities in your life, like, what hill will you die on? But feeling a bit of national pride or fondness for your nation, or especially, I guess, when it comes to sports and stuff, that feels, there's a level of like, that's innocuous, but I realize, you just need to look at football fans abroad. Sometimes it can go a little too far.
Yeah, I got to say, I think because I'm not a particularly patriotic person, and I remember being forced to sing the national anthem and finding it weird. And that was in a non-colonial, but admittedly apartheid country. And that was not how I was raised. And I do remember one of my teachers saying, if you slouched like that during the national anthem in Russia, you'd be shot. Who knew the effect they'd have on me? I don't care who wins in a football match, so I don't have that kind of, this is our team and our team wins. I do see I think it's kind of like telling people that they need to stop with their fossil fuel stuff when they're just about to pull people out of poverty, rather than, countries that have enjoyed the Industrial Revolution and, like, we all need to just stop caring about nation and leave things as they are, which I assume he can't be saying, and I don't think he is. But you can totally understand nations under threat using the nation as a powerful motivating force for resistance. The question, I guess, is whether that ever leads to something good. I think I feel privileged in coming from South Africa, where nobody was fighting for South Africa. They weren't even fighting for a race. They were fighting for human rights, and I think that is a larger thing that you could be fighting for, if fighting is okay. Thoughts?
I was thinking as well, earlier about the veterans and war and stuff like that. And I think that is, number one, quite a touchy subject. I think especially in the UK, it's like I definitely have some opinions about the war and how we remember it that I wouldn't share to my family, because I know it would upset them, and it's just like things like that I wouldn't want to share. But also, and I do to an extent, I think, especially in again in America, kind of veterans are idealized, and military spending is insane, and I think that is a problem. But also, I would be reluctant to forget, and I do, again, idolization is a problem, but I would be reluctant to forget things like the Second World War and Remembrance Day, when they are still having an impact, and they have had a real impact in our lives today, as much as it might feel like they happened years and years and years ago. Like, they happened a short time ago in the grand scheme of things, and they are having a real impact in our society today. And I think it would be remiss of us to forget that. And I don't think you can just, we need to stop, remembering this now. I think I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, there's a difference between the amazing, genuine sacrifices that individuals make. I just hate to sit here and pontificate about what you should and shouldn't die for. When I'm like, if someone's prepared to go and put their life on the line for a cause, that's incredible. But I think it's quite convicting when Stephen contrasted people dying on my behalf or people killing on my behalf. And suddenly it's like, oh, wow, okay, I need to take that on board as well. I need to be happy, own that sense of tribal identification, I guess. If people are dying on my behalf, then yeah, they're killing other people on my behalf.
Yeah. I think this is why I always feel uncomfortable with the military. And I know that there are many good, faithful Christians who serve in the military and have no problem with it. And I guess that's fine. But the early church excommunicated you for being in the military because you were obliged to kill, I think. Definitely at least part of it is that, if not killing on behalf of the nation, which is, I imagine what this guy's kind of issue with that would be. And yeah, it is a very touchy subject in this country where if you burn a poppy, it enrages people, because we are supposed to remember the sacrifice, except the vast majority of people who fought in that war were conscripted and didn't love it and suffered needlessly in the First World War. And the Second World War was a direct result of the first and the way that was concluded. So a whole bunch of people, at least in the First World War, were sacrificed to maintain imperial boundaries. How is that heroic? How is that good? And it's not like it's their fault. And I'm not shouting at the Vietnam vet who comes home, without his legs. But I am saying there's a thing. Lee Child, who writes the Jack Reacher novels, who is, and they're very kind of like macho. They're fantastic, by the way. I love them. He says in a book, in a kind of short kind of monograph called The Hero, where he talks about the hero, and he talks a lot about this association of heroes with any soldier, when no definition of hero suggests that. And he says the automatic association of soldier with hero was explicitly political, as it still is, and served to short-circuit discussion, as it still does, which I think is a quite poignant thing about when we talk about our heroes being anyone who served in the military, many of whom will have done so absolutely out of the best motivations, but will also have been part of killing civilians. And I think perhaps the point that we can take from that is that if we're willing to not make a fuss about that, then we are just as complicit and just as guilty.
Yeah, and we're probably not representing the actual views of actual veterans when we kind of pare it back to that one-dimensional view. I saw The Five Bloods recently, filmed by Spike Lee.
So good. It's on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, you really should.
And you really see some of that, what seems like summing up a big part of the black perspective on the Vietnam War, that they were, forced into, dragged into this war that they didn't believe was right and forced to kill and die on the government's behalf.
Yeah. And speaking of people who had political profiles, if not politicians, Martin Luther King vehemently against the Vietnam War, on Christian grounds, on the fact that this was an imperialist war, on the fact that this was a war against the poor, fought by the poor, on behalf of the rich. Muhammad Ali said the same thing, particularly after his conversion to Islam. Interesting stuff, but the kind of stuff that could get you punched in the face in this country.
100%.
Okay, so basically, that's just a few of our thoughts. We're going to be talking to Stephen Backhouse. Stephen Backhouse?
Yeah.
Yes!
Bob Monkhouse.
Bob Monkhouse. We will be talking to Stephen Backhouse really soon, if he still wants to be on our podcast, having had the time to listen to it. And we'll be asking him some of these questions, but we'd love to ask your questions and pass on your comments and hear what he thinks about that. Also, check out his podcast, Tent Theology, and see other things that he has to say. But yeah, give us your questions, beerchristianity@yahoo.com, or find us on Twitter and ask us there, and we will pass them on. Any final thoughts,
Jonty.
guys? Hey, yeah?
Jonty, before we go, don't you hate
Malky.
it? How you can never find gloves that fit correctly? Well, worry no more. At fitslikeaglove.com, you can use the handy online hand measuring tool to get exactly the right fit every time. For the small fee of $12.99 per month, you can have a brand new pair of gloves delivered straight to your door every 6 to 8 weeks, with gloves for every occasion You'll never run out of gloves again. If you're not completely happy, cancel at any time and receive a full 5% refund. Sign up today using the offer code Beer Christianity the podcast and receive 1 free sample glove of your choice. Fitslikeaglove.com, where great quality and great prices go hand in glove. I just think sponsored content's important.
It is.
And, it's important to give those people a platform.
And we love our sponsors, so please do support them. Yeah, that is great. That's really good. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for listening to Beer Christianity. We will be back relatively soon with some more premium content and great sponsorship deals. So thank you for listening. Find us in all the usual... I smell toast. Find us.
Well,
Find
what way
us.
go?
You are doing what you love.
Tune in again. Come and find us. Talk to us. Listen to more. And thanks. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Love you.